If there's one thing I learned while making these Overwatch Ranked Stories, it's that a lot of you guys want to rank up much more badly than I do. And another thing is that some of you, not all, just some, don't have the greatest sense of judgment. If we take a minute to really be honest with ourselves, I think we can agree that none of us always fire on all cylinders. There are 100 things we can point at to explain why we're underperforming before we are willing to admit that we're just not as good as we thought we are. And considering the fact that Overwatch is a team game, we always got 5 other players we can blame for a loss anyway. Something a lot of you guys probably didn't know is that back in Season 2, when Blizzard introduced the ranked system as we know it today, I placed in Platinum. I fought my way into Diamond during that same season before reaching Masters in the next one, and just another one later, during Season 4, I hit Grandmaster for the first time ever. And my secret at the time, as much as now, is reviewing my own gameplay. Needless to say that 4 years ago, nobody watched my videos other than myself, but the fact that I did make videos allowed me to relive all of my mistakes, rather than being blissfully ignorant about them. I didn't have a choice but to admit that I was bad at the game when I was looking at the evidence while editing. But the first step to improving is understanding that there's something worth improving at. So today's video is going to have a bit more of an educational flair. See it as a VOD review with extra steps. While we are going to recite the events of my last placement match on my old account, finally lifting the secret behind what rank the game believes I should be in, I'm also going to try and post-rationalize my mistakes so that hopefully you guys can learn from them. We are also going to take a look at voice comps and what you can take away from them, as well as a lot of other things that I believe can help you rank up. This seems like a fitting way to end off 2020, because just like this year was a nightmare to deal with, so is competitive play in Overwatch. But if we can all learn something from it, maybe we can start off the next year as better players and better people. Now without further ado, our story today takes place on Busan. A common theme you will find in these games is that, being true to my word, I try to flex on my team and play characters that aren't usually very popular. Of course, many players consider Brigitte a must-pick in the current meta, and as such, I won't get around playing her, especially on a map that she absolutely excels at. And since this was my first game of the day, I didn't actually mind playing a hero that isn't quite as demanding. But to my surprise, my second support asked me to play the other meta support hero. I'm not, like, really good at it, but I can.
Okay, I'll play buff,
Okay. Honestly, I found that hint of fearful regret in his voice absolutely hilarious. I'm pretty sure at that point he expected me to be a Brig one-trick or something, and immediately changed his mind about having me play something else. Going to the first team fight, you can watch my brain turn to mush in real time. I have a big problem with staying focused on playing characters I find boring, and considering the fact that you can get away with taping down your W key in Diamond, I never really had to think about what I'm doing on this hero. But as you can see in slow motion, my Reinhardt backed out while being critically low on HP, which should have been a great reason for me to play more carefully. But of course I didn't, and I paid the price for it. I mean, heck, he even announced his play in voice chat, so there was no excuse for my misplay other than sheer incompetence. The lack of healing immediately caught up to us as the enemy Echo began tearing through our front line, really driving home the importance of self-preservation. That initial victory on Mecha Base allowed the enemies not only to get the first cap, but also to set up a choke point defense. A lot of compositions are going to have a hard time getting past this, but thankfully the enemy team didn't have enough poke damage to stop us from closing the distance. And them holding so close meant that once we were in melee range, I would have no trouble getting my Inspire going, which adds a lot of survivability to my team. As far as basic plays are concerned, I think piling onto the enemy Sigma after having cancelled his grasp was a good idea, especially since I was very vocal in voice chat about it. But once again, I was stepping in front of my tanks to lead the charge, not realizing that my Reinhardt was losing the main tank battle behind me. A teamfight like this can still be salvaged. I mean, it's not the prettiest thing ever, but as long as you can do enough damage for the rest of your team to start cleaning house, there is a good chance to win. Our ticket to victory in this case was the fact that the enemy team's positioning was about as questionable as their use of ultimates. Players will often get a confidence boost when winning the first fight, especially when said win came very easily. It is important not to underestimate your opponents and start wasting cooldowns and ultimates in hopes of being a hero. The enemy team came back via the high ground route, while my team chose the underground path in order to set up on the objective. If their Lucio went for a reset rather than a backline feed, that play could have worked out, as they could use the high ground to poke us off of the objective. But now we had the man advantage and, lag spikes aside, successfully captured the point. Now please don't ever do what this Echo is doing right here. Their entire team is still respawning, they are obviously not trying to aggressively secure a pick, and whatever amount of poke damage they do is completely useless because they already have their ultimate, whereas that damage is feeding our support ultimates. When you do this, you are needlessly risking getting staggered while exclusively benefiting the enemy team. Our Genji saw an opportunity to actually secure that kill, which wouldn't be a bad idea if he chased any other hero, but Echo has unrivaled mobility that allowed him to get away, while our Genji got caught up by their respawning teammates. At least our soldier eventually found her to equalize the engagement. Unfortunately, we didn't get to hold onto the objective for a long time because that deep into a match, both teams have a lot of ultimates at their disposal to make dry pushers a thing of the past. Though it is worth highlighting that the enemy team grossly overcommitted with their ultimates. Essentially, they used everything they had except for Shatter, when just having eliminated me on Brig with their Flux would have probably been enough. I do understand them using Sound Barrier to counter our Gravitic Flux, though we were already 2-man down and our tanks were low on HP, so they could have probably done without it. And when the enemy Echo decided to toss their ultimates into the mix as well, we all knew that the next teamfight should definitely be ours, even if we lost the objective for now. Here you can see really well that every match of Overwatch is composed of a lot of small decisions you make in a very short period of time. My team was calling to group up for a right side push, while my support instinct was telling me that I might be able to save my Genji, who was in the process of getting staggered. The right decision here would have been to stick around the left side to toss my Genji a healing pack, because I actually had full confidence in him being able to get out. And the enemy team didn't have any long range bursts to punish me for that position. But since I haven't played a lot of ranked in a really long time, I submitted to listening to the rest of my team, which did eventually cost my Genji his life. That meant we had to engage the next teamfight without our second DPS, which, well, I'm just gonna let this one play out.
I haven't.
Kill Ryan, kill Ryan! Oh my god, no way.
Ryan's still low. You can get Ryan, nice. They're wasting mortality, no mortality.
We better go point here as well.
Up one.
Lucian. Above you, Genji.
No more ults, no more ults.
It's just Sigma point.
One.
McCree. Nice.
Good job. I think there's a lot you can take away from this clip, particularly the voice comms. You will notice that we immediately called out the enemy Reinhardt as an obvious weak point, and since I had my rally up, I could actually just walk into him to smash him through his barrier. Calling out crucial cooldowns like them having wasted immortality with no good benefit is also important because it means you can press the advantage more aggressively. Another really important callout was no more ults, making sure that, contrary to the enemy team, we don't waste more than the necessary. And once the teamfight was won, just letting everyone know they did a good job is great for team morale. Something like nice or well done can already do the trick. Believe it or not, I won more games on the back of good voice comms than through mechanical skill. In fact, I believe that a carry attitude is more detrimental than helpful to your chances of ranking up. The next teamfight was not as clean as the previous one because our voice comms got a bit messy. We weren't in agreement about whether or not we should engage early, and the disparity in aggression between my tank line and me was once again very apparent. It sounds like a joke, but I really meant it when I said in the previous video, it doesn't matter if you are feeding as long as you are feeding as a team. And me not prioritizing my own life while playing Brig can actually end up being a huge detriment to the rest of my team. But only because a teamfight gets messy doesn't mean you can't win it. The enemy Baptiste continued to waste his ultimate just for him to get some inconsequential damage out, and my Sigma was putting a masterclass in positioning on display, as far as Masters players are concerned anyway, and thanks to my Baptiste staying alive, he could spend his time keeping my Sigma alive, who continued to pressure the opposition. Since the capture progress had reached 90% in our favor, a scrappy teamfight like this actually benefited us more than the enemies. I preemptively armor packed my Baptiste so he can continue healing our tanks, but when I saw the enemy Hammond going for my soldier, I knew that had to take priority. There is not a dang thing you can do as a soldier when getting juggled by a Hammond, so you hugely rely on your team helping you out. The enemy team needed a cohesive approach to take the objective, but them splitting to take two separate fights really just played into our cards. Our tanks on high ground stopped their team from touching the objective, and any solo diving attempts were immediately halted by the fact that Brigitte is an anti-diving character. The first round was ours, and if you were hoping for me to play characters other than Brig, then this might be your lucky day, because as fate would have it, my teammates had no problem with me swapping in the next round. Playing in higher elo games definitely feels a lot like gambling. You can tell your teammates are confident in their abilities when they advocate for everyone to play their strongest pick, meta be damned, whereas them insisting to adhere to the meta is usually not the greatest sign. But knowing that I hadn't put up the best of performances on the last round, I wasn't gonna make that decision on my own. Do you want Lucio or Brig here?
Whatever you want, bro.
I wasn't gonna let him tell me twice. This part of Busan really lends itself to snipers, and as such, I found myself having more success on Lucio in the past. It appeared the enemy team had a similar approach, although with a lack of cohesion. One of their tanks decided to kick the round off playing Roadhog, and that while committing to a very deep flank. Of course, I spotted him and immediately called it out, allowing us to avoid getting picked off right from the get-go. And as much as I was knocking the enemy team's cohesion, they did turn around to try and help their flanking hog, though that did put them in a bad position in which they had no choice but to retreat. My Reinhardt asked me to go cap the point while they were holding the front line, but the enemy Tracer was trying to delay the inevitable as much as possible. Thanks to my Baptiste, I wasn't really in any danger, while that Tracer had to weigh the importance of their stall against the value of their own life. But our position was definitely stronger than theirs, and with our flag firmly planted on the ground, my Genji found an opening to start cleaning house. As soon as our Genji opened up the fight, our tanks made the call to aggressively push for more staggers, and we wouldn't miss out on an opportunity to charge our ultimates utilizing the enemy Roadhog. Here's a bit of a tip for those of you who maybe don't play a lot of Lucio. When an enemy is running away, try to use your speed to get in front of them so that you can boop them back into your team rather than just booping randomly for extra damage. My team understood the importance of chasing staggers because not only does it buy you extra time on the clock, but sometimes it forces the enemy team into making mistakes, such as using an ultimate in their spawn. As you can see, that ended up being completely inconsequential for us, and trading a few seconds worth of capture percentage for a high impact ultimate was definitely worth it. The enemy team bought themselves a bit of space to regroup and form an attack, but our team wouldn't just sit there idly for them to do so.
I will blade this now. Can you guys go in?
Oh, my bad.
6 to the right side. Sig one.
That one.
6 actually.
This might seem odd, but try not to do what I just did here. Baptiste does a lot of damage, and simply charging into him head-on is going to get you killed more often than not when they are more competent than you. Also, the guy was paddling back towards his spawn in an alleyway that my team had no line of sight to, meaning my callouts really just clogged up the voice chat for no reason. Considering this was a high Masters lobby and not an Overwatch League scrim, mistakes like these are expected to happen. Nobody plays perfectly, but considering the rank we are in, this was a very clean engagement with a very clean disengage. If I had to give it a guess, I would assume that the enemy team was either lacking voice comms or they weren't on the same page about how to take these fights, which is something that happens a lot in this game mode when losing the first round. If you ever find yourself on that side of the coin, try to make sure that you continue to call the shots with confidence to give your team a sense of the game still being winnable. Anyway, only because you're winning doesn't mean you can't make mistakes, and the following play is going to illustrate that. My Baptiste had announced in voice chat that he was about to drop his widescreen TV, which was bound to buy us more time on the clock as it should stop the enemy team from pushing through main. But for some reason, I thought we were in last fight territory, so my idea was to initiate an aggressive push with my beat drop. Needless to say that utilizing that beat drop would require my team to speed past the matrix that my Baptiste just put up, but even more importantly than that, this was not the last team fight! To top the whole thing off, I did not communicate my intention behind this play, while my Baptiste did, meaning my whole team gave me the very appropriate reaction of, They definitely tried to make the best of it by playing as aggressively as possible to at least get some ultimates of the enemy team, but needless to say that we lost this fight just because my brain completely shut off. You see, it is important to own up to your misplays and understand why you did what you did. Small mistakes can be forgiven since this was my first game of the day, but a blunder like that really should not happen in Masters. There was one saving grace though, because the enemy Baptiste would stick to his meme and keep using his ultimate at the least appropriate times possible. If you have been paying attention to this video long enough to end up so far into it, then surely you have already realized that my team is simply better than the enemy team. That's not to say they didn't have a chance to win, but this appeared to have been a voice comm diff because their team play just couldn't measure up against our cohesion, even if said cohesion was that of Masters players. And while you watch us win this final team fight on the back of very basic plays, let me just say that I always see a bunch of comments from people that really don't seem to have a good idea of how skilled their teammates should be. It's absolutely hilarious to me when I read a comment saying that guy looks like a gold player when they're actually displaying average Masters gameplay. But then they end their commentary praising a Smurf because apparently to be playing in Masters you need to be as good as a Grandmaster. All I'm saying is, if you never reviewed your own gameplay with honesty, you'll be surprised to see yourself make the same and even more mistakes than those that you criticize in the comment section. As I said at the start of the video, nobody always fires on all cylinders in every single game at every day of the week. We all make mistakes, and the best thing we can do is try to learn from them. With that said, I definitely should not be in 3800 right now, because I'm most certainly making way too many mistakes for that rank. And it also doesn't help that I accidentally climbed into 3900 by now. Listen, I know this video was a bit uneventful, but after that behemoth of an episode I crunched to get done in time for Christmas, I hope you can forgive me. I could have tried to play some more Overwatch throughout the Christmas weekend to get a better game, but I mean, why would I want to ruin my holidays by playing ranked? Jokes aside, I'm certain you can understand. Anyway, thank you everybody so much for sticking around. I very much appreciate each and every one of you. If you did enjoy the video, then do let me know by dropping me a like on your way out. Consider subscribing if you want to see more, and remember, you can't change the people around you, but you can always work on yourself. That is not only true for Overwatch, but also real life. Thanks again everybody, and here's to a successful 2021.